God will be tomorrow, this in itself should be the very beginning of our day. At least it's a good start. Theoretically, then, we should be able to relax in the knowledge God is, always was, and always will be, and there's nothing else. But something in us won't let us relax in that. And we want to discuss that something in a different way than you have ever discussed it before. About 450 years before Jesus was born, a Greek by the name of Democritus in the city of Thrace had an idea that there was a thing called an atom. He called it atomos. Nobody knew much what he was talking about, so he picked up a cloud of earth and he shook it around and he said, "Now watch how it dissolves in my hand." Finally, he got down to a grain of sand, and he said, "I can't go any further because if I do, you won't see what's there." But he said, "Smaller than this grain of sand, there is a substance." And I could keep going smaller and smaller and smaller to a substance that nobody could ever see until I reach a place where there's no smaller substance. He says, that's the atom. That's atomos. There was a man named Aristotle there. And Aristotle didn't give much credence to this. And so because Aristotle was the big mind of the day, the first glimpse of the atom was lost to mankind until Galileo came along. Now, Galileo is very important in this discussion because he looked out through the earlier telescope and he saw rings around Saturn. He saw 4 larger moons around Jupiter. He saw mountains on our moon and he saw spots on our sun. And suddenly the world knew that there was something called an outer universe, which they hadn't known till then. And it was just another 100 years when someone looked through a microscope in Holland, a Dutchman, Leeuwenk. And he began to see that there is also an inner universe. These little crawling, one-celled animals that nobody suspected existed. And now man discovered that he was surrounded by an inner universe he had never suspected and an outer universe, and he was standing right in between both of them. That was how it began, and from it, Sir Isaac Newton picked up the idea of the atom, but nobody had any proof. It was all conversation. Until they began to measure things. And finally, in the year 1808, there was published the atomic theory. No one knew how that was going to change the universe, and still no one does know. From that atomic theory of John Dalton in 1808, things began to pop. Now they discovered that the atom combines with other atoms, and that became a molecule. They discovered that these combinations became the elements of our Earth. And now they knew what an element was. It was a combination of atoms. But they didn't know what was inside the atom. And all this time, no one yet knew about nuclear fission. That remained for someone in France who discovered a worthless metal called uranium. And he discovered a strange thing about uranium. It was radioactive, and it sent forth a strange light, a strange energy, a strange power. And this was finally identified by the Curies. In 1903, they discovered that inside radium was an activity of the atom. And this activity of the atom coming through radium, they defined as radioactivity. We're up to 1903, just 66 years ago, when the world learned that radioactivity comes from inside the element, and the element within itself is made of atoms which are nucleating within themselves. No one suspected the amount of energy that was there. Now Einstein told them how much energy was there. His formula was very simple. If you took a mass of matter and you multiplied the size of that mass by light, and then multiplied light by itself, you would know how much energy was there. And so what he was saying is that if you took a mass and multiplied it by 3.5 billion, that would tell you the amount of energy in a mass. That would tell you how much energy in every atom, in every element, if you could just determine its size. Now they have the idea of endless energy. From that came chain reaction, the splitting of the atom. And finally, Nagasaki. Nuclear weapons today. Now, what is all this about? How does it affect us? Radioactivity, which is confined to the atom, is the activity of the physical body. Science has pinned down the atom as the substance of matter. And they are 50% correct. Because the atom radiates, you can be sure that what you had thought of as your physical body is nothing but a radioactive factory. You are carrying around one of the great radioactive nuclear fission factories in this world. Your body is a complete nuclear fission universe. And that's how it works. The atoms of your body, radioacting, open out, send forth their particles of light. They are stimulated a certain way, they respond a certain way, and the activity of these radioactive atoms of the physical form become what we have called our bodies. Now, although error is something we wish to eliminate, it must be seen that the odds against us are bordering on something beyond the word fabulous. The very tip of your finger has enough atomic power in it to blow up the world if it were released. Your complete body, this nuclear fission factory, is made up of so many atoms that it's impossible to count them. To give you an idea, if you started to make a necklace, just a 25-inch necklace, and you wanted to put one atom on it, string another atom on it, and another atom on it, to take the atoms of your body and string them on a necklace 25 inches long would take you day and night 200 years. Science says that if we took the entire atoms of our body and took the air out of them, the empty spaces, that these atoms compressed then, and that's all we are physically, would become no bigger than a grain of sand between your fingers. Science says that if you took the entire United States Navy and took out all the empty spaces between the atoms and compressed the atoms together, you could put the whole Navy inside of half of a baseball. But the weight of it would still be the same weight that it is now. The weight is all in the atom. At this moment, you are breathing atoms. Something like every intake of breath takes in approximately 100,000 billion atoms per intake of breath. Now then, if you want to estimate the number of atoms of which your body is composed, you would have to get out a slide rule, and you would see that you're talking about quadrillions of quadrillions of quadrillions, and the point of it is that these atoms are all radioactive. That means little particles of light within your physical self are responding to other particles of light, and there's nothing to stop these particles of light of which the body is composed from responding to particles of light in other forms, so that we are all radioactive to each other. And if you will pursue this but a moment further, you will see that these radioactive atoms of the body are little cameras. And each one is photographing the universe around it. Each one is photographing each other unto infinity. For there is nothing to stop them from photographing right through each other unto infinity. And now we have mirrors, all reflecting. And if you go further and further, you find you have one universal radioactive wave. And this is the sum and substance of the physical body of man. You might just as well stand up to a hurricane and defy it as try to come out of this radioactive wave of atoms, which is the substance of the physical forms of man. It's as if you were a television tube, and there you were. What could you do about the pictures coming through you? Absolutely nothing. And so it's important to see that in you at this moment is all of the good and all of the evil in this universe. In you at this moment. It is all there, all embodied, all potential in the atoms of your body. This is why we are unable to escape the outpicturing of the evils of this world. We are all vibrating atoms, vibrating to and in response to other vibrating atoms, both external to ourselves and internal to ourselves, as human beings. We are merely clarifying at this moment the nature of the universal error and letting science contribute to that clarification as far as it's able to go. Now here we are then, in a state of radioactivity, not knowing it, and through the picture tube which we have become, we are really a picture tube, through us comes radioactive impulses from all around us. There's nothing we can do about it until we awaken from that identity of being a picture tube, a true human antenna. Now this is the nature of the human error. It really seems strange that we had to wait for science, which is godless, to tell us about it. And so you see that science can be a martyr for God in spite of itself. The chain reaction, which makes possible the activity of missiles and bombs, also takes place in our own human being right now. Every stimulus from outside produces in you a chain reaction